listening to
Catholic Sprout,
the daily podcast for Catholic kids that strives to plant seeds of faith.
Welcome back, Sprouts. Today is March 13th, and I am your guest host, Jill Simons. I am here with you all week talking about charisms, which are special gifts that God has given to us in order to build the church. And today, we're going to be talking about how you can know what specific charisms you have been given. This is through a process called discernment. If you have heard about discernment before, it was likely in terms of discerning your vocation. Is God calling you to be a priest, to be a nun, to be a monk, to be a married person, or to be a lay single person? That's where we talk about discernment most frequently, but that's not the only thing that we can discern. Discerning is about going through a prayerful process of listening to God and receiving from God what it is that we should do, and really having clarity about that. It means really knowing for sure what it is that we are supposed to do. And so that's very important in discerning your vocation, but it's also really important in discerning your charisms, knowing which charisms specifically you have been given. So the process for discerning your charisms is similar to other important things that we discern. So the very first step of knowing what your unique charisms are is narrowing down the list. There are a lot of charisms you might have. There are 24 on our list of charisms, and that is so many options. That's too much to test and to figure out all at one time. So it's really good to kind of narrow down the list, figure out what your most likely charisms might be. Then I want you to think about a bucket that you take to play in the sand. Maybe you have a sandbox at your house. Maybe you've been to the beach. You can take a big bucket and you can fill it with sand. And it might sound really obvious, but the bucket gets more full the more sand you put into it. Now, I want you to think about discerning your charisms like having an empty bucket. And as we discern, as we come to be clear on which charism is ours, it's like we're putting more sand into that bucket. And once it's full to the top, that's when we can really have clarity about the fact that, yes, this is one of my charisms. So how do you fill your bucket with sand? Gather evidence. If you have ever read a mystery story or done science experiments, you are familiar with gathering evidence, getting different information and putting it all together. So how do we gather evidence for our charisms? The first thing that we do is we talk to people in our lives. Talk to your parents, talk to your siblings, your friends, your teachers, and ask them, does it seem like I have this charism? Or if they're not sure what that charism is, you can kind of explain it to them. Maybe you're trying to figure out if hospitality is one of your charisms. And so you can go to your parent or your friend and say, can you think of a time where I really was good at making someone feel welcome, or I made you feel welcome? And if they're able to point to specific times that you have done that, that's something that can be like sand in your bucket. That can go in your bucket and say, okay, I've got a little bit of evidence that hospitality might be one of my charisms. And at the same time, maybe they won't be able to think of something like that. That doesn't automatically mean it's not your charism. It just means that you don't have evidence necessarily from the past about that. So what can we do if that's the case? Maybe you feel like you don't have a lot of evidence from the past for any of the charisms that you're thinking about that you might have. What you can do is create tests. This is also like science. If you've ever gone through the scientific method in your science classes, you know that you need to test to get more evidence. So that's what we can do with our charisms. Sticking with our hospitality example, let's say you're trying to test and see if hospitality might be one of your charisms. Maybe you can volunteer to be a greeter at Mass. Maybe you can test that out. Say hi to people, welcome people to Mass, and see how they respond, see how you feel. What did people think of that? Did they feel really welcomed? And so you can try testing the same charism in as many different ways as you want. This doesn't have to be big things that you have never done before. This can be simply things that you would normally do as you go through your day. Maybe you are testing a charism of encouragement. Maybe you would always encourage your friend, but now that you are trying to discern your charisms, when you encourage your friend, you can be more intentional and more aware, asking the Holy Spirit, can you help me know if this is my charism through this time that I am trying to encourage my friend? When we pay attention, the Holy Spirit can be way more clear with us than we might even expect. Maybe you feel like you don't really know for sure when the Holy Spirit wants you to do something or is moving in your heart. Discerning your charisms and creating these tests can help you become more sure in how the Holy Spirit talks to you. It can help you pay attention and hear his voice in new ways, which is just one of the really cool ways that charisms serve other people, but also help us grow closer to Jesus. It helps us to know the Holy Spirit more and to recognize his voice in our lives. So after several tests like this, you might feel like your bucket is all full of sand. And whenever that happens, then it's time to commit to using your charism. You can commit to using your charism, and that simply means paying attention to all of the opportunities that God places in your life to use that charism. And the way that I do this is with a really simple prayer that you can start praying right away. And that is asking the Holy Spirit to help me be aware of the opportunities to use my charisms and to help me grow in the courage to say yes to all of those opportunities. Now, if you have gone through a testing phase and you feel like you don't really have a full bucket, you don't have a lot of evidence for a charism, that just means that it might not be one of your charisms, and that's okay. That doesn't say anything negative about you. That doesn't mean you haven't done something you're supposed to do. Different people have different gifts, and that's okay. You're not supposed to have all of them. You're not supposed to be able to do every single thing that the church needs. You're only supposed to be able to do your job, and that is okay. God has made you exactly how you are meant to be. He's given you exactly the gifts you're meant to have, and anything that you don't have simply shows you what is not your job. So my challenge for you today, Sprouts, is to think about one charism that you've heard me mention that you think might be one of yours, and to have that first conversation with people that you know and just ask them, have you ever had a time where you've received this from me, where you've seen me use this kind of gift? And if so, you might start planning your own charism discernment with that gift. Start thinking of ways to test it and ways to move forward in seeing if that is really one of the gifts that the Holy Spirit has given you. I'm going to be back tomorrow for one last day to talk about what it is that we do with charisms once we know that we have them. What does it actually look like to live with a charism and use it on a regular basis? So I hope you join me tomorrow for that. God bless you.
That's it for Catholic Sprouts today. We'll be back tomorrow, but until then, continue to grow in your faith and truly sprout into the beautiful creation that God created you to be.
My name is Jill Simons, and I'm guest host on this week's Catholic Sprouts. I am also executive director at Many Parts Ministries, which is an apostolate that helps Catholics of all ages learn about and discern their charisms. I would absolutely love the opportunity to help your family better understand their charisms, and we have great resources for both adults and children to do just that. If you visit manypartsministries.com/charisms for kids with no spaces, no hyphens, just charisms Charisms for Kids. You'll find our entire set of resources, both for adults and for kids. We've got a great free download available for children right now. It is kid-friendly definitions of all 24 charisms, as well as a really fun game of Would You Rather that you can play with your entire family and start exploring what your possible charisms might be together.
This podcast is part of the Spoke Street Network. For more great podcasts, visit spokestreet.com.